Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to our service at Faith Baptist Church on Greenback Road in Morgantown, West Virginia. I've got some very important announcements to give you before we get on to our service. First of all, as we have mentioned in the past, next Sunday, May 10th, we're going to have a special Mother's Day drive-in service. We invite all people to come. If you are a mother, you have a mother, or have had a mother, we're going to be giving away a special gift for you when you arrive. There will be refreshments available as well. It'll be a great time of uplifting and preaching from God's Word, so we encourage you to join us. And the second announcement I'd like to give you today is that we will be doing a special outreach to Marjorie Gardens. We'll be providing dinner from 4:30 to 6 on Wednesday, May 20th. If you are able to provide some items for us, like hamburger patties, hamburger buns, potato chips, individual bags there, or soda or bottled water, please contact me at cordova@faithwv.org. That's cordova@faithwv.org. And we would also love for you to pray for us as we have an opportunity for an outreach to provide the gospel and maybe see some souls won for Christ.
My heart is heavy laden, Lord, my flesh is worn and weak. Thy precious words of rest and peace, I long to hear thee speak. So mid the clashing noise of strife and struggle of the day, I turn my thoughts to thee, O Lord, that I may hear thee say, Come unto me, come unto me, and I will give thee rest. Come unto me, come unto me, be comforted and blessed.
O feeble Christian in dismay, upon the waters deep, thy helpless, weak, and troubled soul he promises to keep. So on the stormy sea of life, when angry waves loom tall, oh, listen for his still small voice, and heed his beckoning call. Heed his call.
Come unto me,
Come unto me,
come unto me,
come unto me,
and I will give thee rest. Be comforted and blessed. Oh, weary sinner seeking peace in wealth and selfish gain, abandon all thy ill pursuits, forsake thy sin and shame. Come lay thy burden at his feet, there's rest in Jesus' name. Obey his kind and tender voice, oh, hear him now proclaim, Come unto me, come unto me,
morning, and I hope everything is going well for you this week and that you've had a good time being able to be at home this morning so far and worship together. And I'm excited to be back in the book of Ephesians today. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Ephesians chapter number 4. We'll try to finish out the chapter of Ephesians 4 today, and looking forward to seeing that. Before we really dig in a little bit more, I want to do something a little bit different. I am the children's and teen pastor. Therefore, I love playing games. All right, and so if you've been in my teen group, if you've been in junior church, you know that anytime we meet, we're going to play at least a short game. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to play a game. We're going to play a game, me and you all at home, and we're going to play an old throwback game. Back to the days of Sesame Street. If you ever remember watching Sesame Street, we're going to be looking at a game that's old school. All right, but I think we'll have a little bit of fun with it this morning. So, the game we are going to play is which one of these things doesn't belong, right? You remember the song? One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. You remember that? Well, we're going to play that game this morning. So, in just a little bit, I'm going to put a picture up on the screen for you to see. And you all at home, kids included, you all at home will pick what thing is not like the other things that are up there on the screen or in the picture that I give you, all right? Are you ready? Okay. Here is your first picture. Boom. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song? You remember that song? That's a good one. All right, which thing didn't belong among those pictures? Very, very good. All right, we had a red tomato and all the other vegetables, although I think tomato is a fruit. All of the other vegetables were green, all right? So we had one red and all the others were green. All right, that's an easy one, kind of gets you up to speed. Let's put the next picture up, all right? Here we go, next picture. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song? All right? That one was a little trickier, but I think you were probably able to spot it. That was one of the cutest pictures I'm going to be able to put up there. But you saw that, all those stuffed animals, but there was one real dog, right? Okay, that was a little trickier than our tomato. Let's see if we can get this next one. All right, let's put the third picture up, and here's the third picture. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't be... Oh, wait, I am very, very sorry. That's my fault. I put up the wrong picture. All of those are actually the same. None of those are different. They're all the same. Sorry, Pastor Drake, but all of those equal the exact same. Sorry for your Cleveland Browns there. I'm sorry. That's my fault. Let's put up the one last one where they're actually all different. Not all the garbage that we just saw. All right. Here's the last one we're going to do. This is a tougher one. All right. You ready? Here's the picture. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell which one is not like the other by the time I finish this song? Did you get that one? Now you're probably looking and saying, I just see a whole bunch of flamingos. And you are right, there's a whole bunch of flamingos, but if you look a little bit closer, there is an imposter among the group. That guy right there. You see him? Yup, he is a fake. That is a goose. That is a goose. Let us know how you did. Did you get all of those, including the third one? Did you get all of those? You were able to spot what thing didn't belong in that picture? All right. And looking at Ephesians chapter 4, and remembering that we're supposed to put off the old man, be renewed, and put on the new man, that now there are things in our life that simply just don't belong anymore. And we're able to spot those things in those pictures, even though they are a little bit tricky. We're able to see what belongs in that picture, what didn't belong in that picture. And we were able to pick out the things that didn't belong in that spot. And what we're going to be looking at this morning is what things, now that you are putting off sin, you're being renewed, and you're putting on the new man, what things specifically don't belong in your life. What things specifically need to be completely put off. And that's what we're going to look at in these 8 verses this morning, starting in verse number 25. So the first thing that we must put off, and then what must be put on, in other words, what doesn't belong and what does belong, we see in verse number 25. Verse 25 says this, "Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor. For we are members one of another." So the first point is that lying doesn't belong, but the truth does. Lying doesn't belong, but the truth does. You realize lying is basically everywhere these days? It's everywhere. And one of the popular phrases to really just put lying into context has been fake news, right? Donald Trump says it, President Trump says it, we all say it. When we don't believe something, everyone just says fake news. Why? Because we think it's a lie. And why have we gotten to the point where it's so easy for us to shout fake news? It's because everyone lies. Think about it. Everyone lies. The world, it's not different for them to lie. It's normal. Lying is everything. Lawyers lie, doctors lie, teachers lie, preachers lie. Well, hopefully not the preachers here, but most preachers out there, they put out lies. Salesmen lie. Have you ever met a lying salesman? This is going to be the perfect car for you, right? You ever met those people? Secretaries lie. Bosses lie. Advertisers lie. There's a whole suit that you can make off of false advertising, right? Politicians lie. Are you sure? Governments lie. Definitely. Everybody lies, and it just keeps going and going. Why? Because lying is expedient. It's helpful. But if we ever get down to it, why do we lie? Yes, because we are sinners. Yes, because lying is a sin and sin is natural, and that's why we lie. But what are the reasons that we lie? This is a really good quote that I thought put lying into perspective. It says, "The reason we lie is because we have desires that we shouldn't have. And the reason we have desires that we shouldn't have is because we are deceived about what is truly desirable." We accept Satan's lies. Satan tries to make us think that certain things are desirable and certain things are helpful, and because we have a wrong picture of what is good and a wrong picture of what is desirable, we are willing to do wrong things to achieve those wrong desires. So what desires, what emotions are the heart of wanting to lie? I think there's 2 that you could boil them down to. We lie because of fear, and we lie because of greed. We lie because of fear, and we lie because of greed. So let's look at those individually. Fear. Why do we lie out of fear? First of all, we could lie out of fear because we are afraid of losing personal esteem, right? You're afraid of someone finding out what you have done wrong, what you have messed up in, and so you lie about it so that you don't get embarrassed, so you don't lose the esteem. And some of you, husbands or wives, you've even lied to your spouse of what you've done at home just because you don't want to be embarrassed, or you don't want them to find out that you messed up in that way. And students, you've lied to teachers because you want to look good in the teacher's eyes. And employers and employees, you've lied to your bosses, you've lied to people who work for you because you want to look good in front of those people. And we lie so that we don't lose personal esteem. We lie because we're afraid. What else can we be afraid of? We lie because we're afraid of physical harm. And this one isn't as maybe prevalent, especially here in the United States, but people lie so that they can stay safe, right? I think of missionaries who might be in this spot where they are being asked, is God the true God? Is Christ truly God? And they're given these tough questions. They're faced with persecution, and they have the choice to say what the truth is or the choice to lie. And looking at in all of Scripture, looking at the martyrs and people who spoke the truth, even if they knew it was going to result in physical harm. I think of Stephen when he was preaching, and he is stoned, and yet he still keeps with the truth. He doesn't stop. He continues on. And many times we can lie because we are afraid. We're afraid of physical harm, or we're afraid of losing personal esteem. The other one is that we lie because of greed. Because we want something. We lie because it can get us more money. We lie because we can move up the chain. We lie because maybe it's a different form of lying. Maybe we embezzle from the company. We lie about our taxes. We lie about our benefits that we've received or haven't received. And we lie about those things because we're lying for personal gain. We're lying for money. We're lying because of greed. That's another purpose of lying. And the last one on greed is we lie because we're greedy for praise. We're greedy for approval. And looking at not just lying because we're afraid to lose esteem, but we lie to gain esteem, to gain praise, to gain approval. And these, I think, two of the main motivations for why we lie. We lie because we're afraid, and we lie because we're greedy. And so looking at that, there's many types of lies you can have, right? You can not give a whole truth. You can maybe exaggerate a certain truth. Maybe it's just a flat-out not truth. Maybe it's part of the truth and not the whole truth. Maybe it's cheating and you're not telling other people about it. There's so many forms of lying. And we can dive into that, and we lie because we have wrong desires, and those wrong desires boil down to fear and greed. But looking beyond that, have you ever lied to yourself? What would it be like if you were lying to yourself? Let's say your eyes started playing tricks on you, right? So you're driving and you decide that your eyes tell you that this is a turn-only lane. And so you turn, you're not supposed to turn there. Maybe your eyes tell you, and they lie to you, that there's not someone coming straight on. Let's say a semi-truck is headed straight for you, but your eyes lie to you and say you're fine. Right? If you're lying to yourself, your body parts start lying to yourself, that would be a problem. Let's say your nerve endings start lying to you. Right? Let's say your pain sensors don't start working, and so maybe something that is maybe deathly fatal, it could be completely fatal to you, but you do not feel pain. Your body is lying to you. And that's a problem. Right? And through lying to yourself, that's an issue. And that's what it's talking about here, what this lying to other believers is like. It says, for we are members one of another. So first of all, don't lie because God is the truth. God has given us truth. But lying, not only is it wrong and it's part of the old nature, but it's also affecting other people. And we are told that we are one body, the church. And when we lie to a fellow believer, to a Christian, it's like lying to yourself. It is harmful. It is not helpful. And so what should we do then? We need to put off lying. Lying does not belong in a Christian's life. It doesn't belong there. But it needs to be replaced with truth. Another great quote here. The lies of Satan that beget lies of sinners have to be replaced by the truth of Jesus that begets the truthfulness of saints. And so my challenge here on this first point is put off lying. Don't listen to the desires that Satan has for you. Instead, replace those desires by knowing what God has for you. By knowing the truth of what Christ has done and how he supplies each thing you need. And he is truly fulfilling all of our desires. And when we see that truth, we no longer see the lies of Satan. We have wrong desires which lead us to doing wrong things through fear and greed, lying. So the first point is that we need to get rid of lying. It doesn't belong, and replace it with the truth. Next point here, verse number 26 and 27. Verse 26 says, be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. When was the last time you were angry? Can you remember? Maybe you were angry at someone who cut you off in traffic. Maybe you were angry at a super slow driver. Maybe you were angry at, we looked at last week, someone else's bad habits. And you were angry at these certain things. Just recently, I was watching the NFL draft just a little bit ago, and I heard and saw hundreds of angry people. I worked in Wisconsin and went to college in Wisconsin, and everybody there are Green Bay Packers fans, right? And for some reason, During the draft, they traded up to take a quarterback, even though they already have Aaron Rodgers on contract for several more years, but they said, let's get a quarterback now and not get some help for Aaron. Man, I saw so many angry fans. I saw angry tweets. I saw angry Facebook messages. I saw pictures of angry fans at the draft, watching the draft. And man, there was some anger spewing out. And anger, it characterizes people's lives. It's normal around the world today. We get angry when something is done to us or something that affects us or something that we enjoy or we love, and we get angry. Whether we spout it out, whether we type it, whether we tweet it, whether we even just keep it in and have a spirit of anger the whole time. Anger is common. Why? Because we are selfish people. And many times our anger is because something happens that we dislike, whether it's to us personally or to something that we care about greatly. And we have anger that spews out when that happens. But we need to put off selfish anger. Selfish anger doesn't belong. Verse 26 says, "Be angry and sin not." But many times our anger is full of sin because our anger is focused on who? It's focused on us. So really quickly, what should this sinful anger be replaced by? It is possible to be angry and sin not. There's no reason why Paul would tell us this if it's not possible. So what does a righteous anger look like? First of all, this righteous anger is God-based. This anger is God-based. We can and should be angry about what happens to God's name and God's work, but not necessarily what's happening to us. And looking at Jesus, the example how he flips the tables in the temple and he rebukes the Pharisees constantly. Why? Not because he was necessarily angry at them as people and just hated them. He hated how God was being portrayed. He hated how God's house was being disrespected. And his anger was focused on God himself. And so when we get angry, we must remember that our anger should be focused at how is this affecting God's name? How is this affecting the work of God? And that should be the source of our anger. Not at what happens to me. Not at how does this affect me, but how does this affect God, his name, and his work. Secondly, this righteous anger is also grief-filled. I'm going to turn to Mark chapter 3 really quickly. And you can do the same if you want. But this grief in anger. Grief in anger. Mark chapter 3, verse number 5. Mark 3:5, it says, "And when he had looked round about them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto the man, Stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other." You get that? Jesus is looking out at this sinful crowd, and he is angry at their questioning and angry at their disbelief and at their sin. And then he says, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts. He is passionate. He is full of zeal for God and his name and for hatred of sin, but he is also grieved for the sinner. And many times we get to a point where we are angry at sin and angry at what is happening that we lose grief and compassion for the people who are committing this sin. And so a righteous anger looks like a zeal and a hatred for sin and anything that tarnishes the name of God or hinders the work of God. But it is not so full of zeal that it makes us hate the sinner. A righteous anger hates sin, loves the sinner. It is full of anger for the disrespect of God's name, but full of love and compassion and grief for the hardness of the hearts of those who commit the sin. And so looking at your anger, when have you been angry in a righteous way? Man, I know it's tough for me. Even if I'm angry at the things that are are going against God, I find myself being angry and not full of compassion and grief for the sinner. There must be a balance to have anger and not have sin. And so the things that don't belong, anger with sin does not belong, but a righteous anger does. Selfish anger doesn't belong, but righteous anger does. Let's look at the next one, verse number 28. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. Stealing. And I hope this is not a problem for you, that you steal things, maybe you shoplift, but I hope it's not, maybe look at the other end of the spectrum, you're stealing money from the government by not reporting taxes, or stealing money from your employer by really not doing work, but just being lazy, or stealing in all these different ways. There's different ways that we can steal, even if it's not directly taking, but there's ways that we can steal. And this comes down to, we need to put off stealing. Stealing doesn't belong, but giving does. That's kind of contrary. Usually we say stealing doesn't belong, but work does. Stealing doesn't belong, but working and getting money does. But Paul actually takes it another step further. He says, don't just not steal, but work. And don't just work, but give with the things that you're working for. Work to give. What is the worst job you have ever had? You ever had some bad jobs before? I remember the worst job I can remember was I was helping my dad one day, and we were in the crawl space of a house, and we were raising up the foundation a little bit. There's a couple blocks and plates that needed some help there. And so we went into this crawl space, and it was in the far back left corner, and the entrance to the crawl space was in the far front right corner. So we were completely long way of the house, long distance to go crawling in this crawl space, and we had to take cinder blocks back there. And if you know me, if you've listened to any of my illustrations, or if you, especially teens, if you've been in teen group, you know my illustrations. I absolutely hate spiders. In this job, you know what was in that crawl space? Tons and tons of spiders. Some of them, I don't think I'd ever even seen this species of spider before. Some of them were like glowing in the dark spiders. Okay, so we had like nuclear reaction spiders, and then there's all like the black dark ones that you couldn't even see while you're in there, and you could just feel the webs as you're crawling back through. And man, I'm getting shivers right now thinking about that job, right? And many times jobs are not always pleasant, but did you know that work was actually something God created, and work is not cursed? Now, many times the displeasure and the unpleasant jobs and the toughness of certain jobs, that's a result of the curse. But work itself is something God created, something that is there, even though we don't enjoy it so much, but God created it. Work is something God made. And so we are to work. Work is not part of the curse. Work is designed by God, but what are we supposed to do? What are we working for? We are not working to have, but we should be working to give. Read this verse again. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good. And then it gives this little thought, that he may have to give to him that needeth. And so from a Christian's perspective, we obviously are not stealing to have, but we are not even just working to have. We are working to give. We're working to give. And so in your life, put off stealing, yes, but put off working just to have, too. And replace it with, what can I do to give? What can I do to be a blessing to other people? And working that which is good, a job that is good, and doing wholesome things, and using those blessings that God gives you through that job to be able to give to others. So, we've seen that we need to have that lying doesn't belong, and that the truth does. We've seen that selfish anger doesn't belong, but righteous anger does. We've seen that stealing, or even working to have, doesn't belong, but giving does. Next, let's see verse 29 and 30. Verse 29 says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption. Another translation here where it talks about corrupt communication, another translation here is rotten. Let no rotten speech, rotten communication come out of your mouth. What comes to your mind when you think of rotten? And if you've left things in the fridge too long and man, you open it up and it is gross, right? And you're taking all these, maybe it's rotten meat that's in there, maybe it's rotten vegetables that's in there, maybe it's old, moldy, stinky cheese that's in there, and think of the characteristics of that, right? It's not helpful, all right? You're not going to eat that and be nourished, right? That rotten fruit isn't going to help. It's sickening, all right? If you did ingest it, if you did have it, it makes you sick to your stomach. And it smells foul. It just creates a bad atmosphere, right? And so looking at like rotten speech, rotten communication, it's not helpful. And it can even be sickening. And it just creates a bad atmosphere when we have this rotten, dirty, corrupt communication. And so corrupt communication, rotten speech, it does not belong in the believer's life. And this can include like taking God's name in vain. It could include trivializing terrible acts and thinking of how people are going to hell and how people are damned to hell. And we use those words trivially and make it not a big deal. But man, that's serious. And sexual humor, talking about the body, talking about another gender, and jokes in that way where that is corrupt. Maybe even it's mean-spirited. Maybe you don't say a curse word. Maybe you don't even say something sexual or God's name in vain, but it's something that tears down another person. Those are examples of rotten speech. It's not helpful. It's not feeding anyone. It creates a stinky, just bad atmosphere. And so we need to put off corrupt communication, rotten speech doesn't belong. And we need to edify others, encourage others, build one another up, help them in their walk, help them in their faith, and use words that will truly encourage them to grow closer with God, encourage them to hate sin, encourage them to put off, be renewed, and put on. And we must put off rotten speech. Rotten speech does not belong, but edifying others does. Last one here, verses 31 and 32, we'll be done. Verse 31 says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice." In other words, just saying, let all these sins that have already been talked about, anger and speaking, but also it adds in bitterness and clamor and malice. "And be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you." The last point here is bitterness doesn't belong, but forgiveness does. Bitterness doesn't belong, but forgiveness does. I worked at camp for a couple of years. I was a counselor in my teen years for, I think, 3 different summers, and then worked as program director and assistant program director at Northland for 2 summers. And looking at so many teenagers and young people, they would get things right with God during a chapel message in the evening or even in the morning, and just seeing, man, this is awesome that God is working. And we saw many teens and kids get saved. We even saw our own staff members make great changes. But you know what? One of the sins, one of the difficulties that many came back to me or a staff member and would be struggling with was bitterness. Bitterness. Someone had sinned against them, and they let it eat them up. Someone had done something wrong to them, and they could never get over it. Whether it was abuse at a young age, whether it was just not being loved, whether it's being neglected, whether it's being broken up with by a boyfriend or girlfriend. Bitterness was rampant in the young people's lives. And I'm even wondering today, not even if you're just a teenager or a kid, but as an adult, you still haven't let go of some things. How someone has hurt you. How someone could do that to you. And you've just held on. And it's caused your spirit to just become bitter and hateful. And as a Christian, bitterness doesn't belong. And you say, well, that's easy for you to say that bitterness doesn't belong, but you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what's happened to me. You're right, I don't. But but God does. And why should we be willing to forgive? Why should we be willing to let go of bitterness? Not because that person necessarily deserves it. Not because we are just so high and mighty so we can do that. But because of what Christ has done for us. I think of the parable where there was a man who was forgiven much by a rich ruler, but then did not forgive a little bit from someone who owed him money. He was forgiven, let's just say $1 million, but didn't forgive $5 for someone else. And we look at him and say, what are you thinking? You've been forgiven so much over here. Surely you can forgive this small debt. When God sees us being bitter, not forgiving, I'm sure that comes to his mind. Look how much I have forgiven you. Can you not forgive your brother or sister in Christ? Or maybe you're sitting here and you've never experienced forgiveness. You don't know what it is like to be forgiven by someone else. No one has ever really forgiven you, and maybe God has never even forgiven you. We all know that none of us are perfect. All of us are sinful in one way or another. We're all born that way. And no one deserves to be in heaven because heaven is a perfect place with a perfect God, and we are not perfect. But can I tell you, there's a God who loves you, and who died for you, and who is willing to forgive any wrong you've ever done, willing to forgive your imperfectness so that you can be in a perfect place. Romans 5:8 says, but God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And if you have not accepted God's forgiveness to be in heaven with him, may I encourage you to do that? There's no better experience than to know you are forgiven. And so, dear Christian, these are the things that don't belong in our lives. Lying, it doesn't belong. Rotten speech, it doesn't belong. Stealing to have and working even to have, it doesn't belong. Bitterness, it doesn't belong. These things don't belong. So let me encourage you this week, Christian, put off. Get rid of the things that don't belong and put on the things that do. Put on truth. Put on righteous anger. Put on forgiveness. Put on edification with your words. And put on giving. And may we truly, through the Spirit of God's help, be pleasing to God and live like the new man. And that in our lives, if we are to inspect ourselves, we would be able to say, if God were to inspect us, he would be able to say, there is nothing there that doesn't belong. Hope you have a good rest of this day. We look forward to our service next week, and hope you are able this week to put on the new man.
One day when heaven was filled with his praises, one day when sin was as black as could be, Jesus came forth to be born of a virgin, dwelt among men, my example is he. Living, he loved me, dying, he saved me, buried, he carried my sins far away, rising, he justified freely forever. One day he's coming, oh glorious day. One day they led him up Calvary's mountain. One day they nailed him to die on the tree.
Suffering, anguish, despised and rejected,
Bearing our sins, my Redeemer is he. Living, he loved me, dying, he oh glorious day.
One day the grave could conceal him no longer. One day the stone rolled away from the door. Then he arose over death he had conquered. Now is ascended my Lord evermore. One day the trumpet will sound for his coming. One day the skies with his glory will shine. Wonderful day my beloved was bringing. Glorious Savior, this Jesus is mine. Living he loved me, dying he saved me, buried he carried my sins far away, rising he justified freely forever. One day he's coming, a glorious day.
Oh glorious day.
Oh, glorious day. One day